Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes, and today we will be diving into an insightful discussion about the executive orders of the new President, Donald Trump. Donald Trump wasted no time after his return to the White House, signing a series of executive orders to crack down on immigration, from revoking his predecessor's policies to declaring Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations. His administration is moving swiftly. The president has also ended the CBP One app used by migrants to request asylum and introduced tougher measures on birthright citizenships. Advocacy groups are already challenging his decisions in court. With his immigration agenda in full swing, the impact is unfolding rapidly. We are joined by 5 guests today. We start off with Dr. Emma Long, an Associate Professor in American History and Politics at the University of East Anglia. We have Elizabeth Larras, a non-resident Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council Global China Hub, joining us from Washington. We have Adit Kothari, Foreign Affairs Expert from London. We have Daniel Wagner, CEO of the Country Risk Solutions, joining us from Portland, Oregon in the USA. And finally, Irina Zuckerman, a Senior Journalist who's joining us from New York. I'd like to start with you, please, Daniel Wagner. Looking at the speed in which Trump has brought in these executive orders, it's something that he promised and it's something that he's done. Do you think he really is going to back up his election promises?
Well, I think he's going to try to do so. Certainly, he wanted to leave his first 24 hours in office with a big bang, and he's done that. The thing that I wonder about is the extent to which some, many, or even all of these are going to be challenged in the courts. And this brings to mind the inherent conflict between the executive, judicial, and legislative branches, and the extent to which Trump is willing to actually go against the grain, go against the law in implementing some of these orders. Some of these are actually against the law. So the question becomes, where are the boundaries for all of these 3 branches of government? And we're going to find out.
Dr. Emma Long, looking at Trump's sort of power and his control over America, of course the Republicans were victorious and they have complete control of politics in the country. Do you think that will make it easier for him to pass through these executive orders?
Well, I mean, the nature of executive orders are that they don't actually require congressional approval, although he's going to need congressional action on some of them to follow them up, whether that's access to finances or, as Daniel was pointing out, sort of to resist any kind of challenges that come through the courts or elsewhere. The fact that the Republicans have control of both houses of Congress as well as the presidency in some ways should make Trump's life a little bit easier. But as we've already seen, there are tensions within the Republican Party on certain issues, and they may well come to the fore in regards to some of these executive orders as they move forward. We're going to have to see. There's been so much happening in such a short amount of time, less than 24 hours really, that we're not yet seeing how some of these things are going to play out. So I think some of the details we'll see as we move forward.
Yes, and Elizabeth Larras, that speed in which Trump has sort of made these statements, he did promise action on his first day and we now have had it. Part of his process is looking at the border with Mexico, something he did during his first term, but he's come back with strong rhetoric. I want to look specifically at his claims against cartels and the fact that they will now be categorised as terrorist organisations. What will that mean in terms of the criminal proceedings for these cartel members if they're caught?
Well, he also invoked the 1798 Foreign Aliens Act, which allows the United States to expel gangs. By designating them terrorist organizations, it allows the president to move with dispatch in throwing them out without having to go through the court systems. You know, in the United States, one is innocent until proven guilty. And so some of the criticism that he's receiving is that he wants to throw alleged criminals out before they have gone to trial. And I believe under this gang executive order, he is able to do that. You know, interestingly, just a few hours ago, Trump moved to remove several senior immigration-related officials from the Department of Justice. They oversee the immigration courts system. So he just essentially, fired 4 of the senior immigration related officials. And now they are career civil servants. Usually there is a procedure to go through. You have to go, there's Office of Personnel Management Rules. But it sounds like he's even redoing the oversight of the immigration court system at the very top to move these executive orders along.
Irina Zuckerman, I'd like to look at Trump's rolling back on several of Joe Biden's policies based around immigration. It's something that he promised to do, it's something that he's done. And specifically looking at his speech in the Capitol during the inauguration, he really did slate the Biden campaign and has pushed his agenda. What do you think that shows in terms of his willingness to just sort of rip up the rule books, rip up what's been there and go with what he believes in?
Well, it is true that Trump, just like Biden, is seeking to reverse and undo a lot of his predecessors' legacy, and quite frankly on immigration, that legacy overall is not positive. From the very beginning of his term, Biden could be said was extremely lax on enforcing existing laws. He also attempted to undo a lot of Trump administration policies that contributed to a huge border security and migration crisis and resulted in escalation of economic, criminal, humanitarian issues related to that. So I can't exactly blame Trump for being critical. That said, he'd do well to focus more on re-establishing his own legacy than on fixating on Biden and his administration's problems in terms of the actual discussion. Of course, some of the policies Trump is bringing back are not new. His stay in Mexico policy was considered a success. It required migrants to stay in Mexico while their asylum cases and other applications were being reviewed, but that also requires a buy-in from Mexico. And if Trump antagonizes Mexico earlier with symbolic gestures rather than working on substantive issues, that could prove to be difficult from a foreign policy perspective. Of course, Trump may be also looking to be more forceful in his Mexico policies in general. Another policy worth noting is the CBP application that facilitates migrants in their process of seeking entry into the United States. That is being shut down. The biggest legal hurdle, however, from Trump's perspective, is his process of ending birthright citizenship for particularly for illegal aliens. It may most likely will require a constitutional amendment, which is possible with an all-Republican Congress, but could still be a major hurdle. Trump only has 2 years to implement his priority policies, and this has been essentially enshrined in U.S. Constitutional law. The presidential powers and executive orders are strongest where they're invested in executive powers, and they're weaker when they require significant legislative input. And this is one of those areas where Donald Trump will have the most legal and political difficulty.
Adit Qatari, thank you for waiting while the other guests spoke there. We're looking at Trump, who is being very forceful with his policies, which has led to some backlash and some criticism. Do you think Trump is just following a path and looking at a divided nation, but one with more support for him, as opposed to pleasing everybody in the United States?
Absolutely, Joshua. I think, first of all, thanks for having me. I think more importantly, he acknowledges the sort of strong mandate that he's received from the electoral process, and as a consequence, he made it clear that immigration was one of the foremost issues that he was going to act on. And day one, he comes out and he goes bang, straight on immigration. He's talking about contentious issues about the illegal workforce in the United States, including ending birthright citizenships. So those are some of the very contentious issues that he aims to mitigate, and that's what he's done. The point now being, he's passed, he's given the executive order, but actually putting that through the execution is going to be the challenging bit, because we have to remember that 11 million, I think it's circa 11 million, sort of illegals that live in the United States, that make up roughly about 5% of the workforce. You take out that 5% from the workforce, how do you fill that vacuum? That is something that was, not very well addressed even during his first tenure of his presidency. Many from within his own sort of camp, challenged that particular aspect, saying that, no, we do need immigration, because we do need that kind of workforce to fill in the economic agenda of the United States. So those are going to be some of the challenges that he needs to sort of mitigate. He needs to understand this much more clearly. Then again, what happens to U.S. citizens who are born in the United States, but their parents are illegals, and they are willing to go across to Mexico. What happens to those children? Do they stay in foster homes, or do they travel across with their families? That sort of family separation. I think it was 2018 which created a massive uproar worldwide. So is he willing to face that again? So those are some of those contentious questions that I think everybody will be asking themselves. Joshua.
Elizabeth, Laris, looking at the impact of business that was mentioned there, we of course know that Trump's tariff threats, which we're yet to see if they will be enacted and will be sort of acted upon, the impact that could have on business, as well as potentially losing up to 5% of the workforce. What do you think that impact will be within the states, and how will Trump aim to combat that and continue to promote American business as he wants to?
If they happen simultaneously, it will be difficult for the American economy to grow at what's relatively robust rate for a developed country, 2 to 3%. I believe with a good amount of certainty that he will at least impose tariffs on China. That is certainly an opening salvo, because he plans to meet Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and so Trump needs to have some leverage, knowing that the growth of the Chinese economy has slowed and is maybe even entering a deflationary period. Regarding the workforce, what certainly needs to be done is reform to legal immigration policies. It takes absolutely forever for people to come to the United States legally. And if you look at the people, the Hispanic community and some of the African community that voted for Trump, particularly to crack down on illegal immigration, it took them so long to come to the United States and get citizenship. And they were the ones that have no patience for illegal immigration. And so what needs to happen then is legal immigration reform, and the companies that need to hire workforces will have to apply through a certain process so they could bring in immigrants. The United States needs immigrants. We're getting to a point where we will be a dying country because we are now below replacement rate for replacing our population. So if we want our economy to grow, we need to have people. We need to bring in skilled people through a legal process.
Dr. Emma Long, we've spoken, of course, about illegal migration, but looking at deportation, Trump, during his inauguration speech, said that millions and millions and millions of people would be deported. How is a mass deportation on that scale possible within a shorter time frame?
I think the answer to that really is it isn't. And that's one thing that the campaign really didn't address, which was the logistics of making this possible. It's all very well to have a campaign speech or a campaign slogan which says this is what we're going to do. But when you think about it, the reality is just hugely complicated, and it's expensive. And of course, one of the other campaign pledges that Trump promised were tax cuts and reduced government spending. Those two things simply don't sit together. So I think what you're going to see is a sort of an introductory period, maybe small scale deportation and raids. We've heard a lot in the last couple of days about the possibility of Chicago and some of the other sanctuary cities being targets for this. So I think this is going to be something that's going to start relatively small scale, but with big fanfare, to kind of, so Trump can say to his supporters, look, I'm taking action on these things. And then it is likely to ramp up in scale, because it's going to take that kind of time to put the infrastructure in place, let alone, as Elizabeth pointed out, having just got rid of some of the people who oversee the immigration process. You need people in place to make this system work, and that is also going to take time for Trump and the administration to sort out. So I don't think it's going to look quite the way that Trump and his team portrayed it throughout the election.
Daniel Wagner, and bringing it back to the speech that Trump made at the Capitol, he referred to himself as the commander-in-chief and also spoke about mobilising military forces to the southern border. How do you think that might play out, and what would the impact be on stopping immigration?
My view is that's probably the least problematic part of this whole equation. I mean, it's very simple for him to simply deploy forces on the southern border. That won't stop everyone, of course, who still is intent on getting in. We have an enormous border. It's 1,500 miles long in the south. And there is, of course, as a result of a failure to follow through on promises he made in his first administration, very little of the border wall that was actually supposed to be in place. But more to the point, from my perspective, I hear very little talk about really the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is what is going to be done to correct the flawed immigration laws in America. If we can't get that right, then what real difference is it going to make if they do all of these other things? A new administration could come in and change the law again. So I think the important point is to focus in these first 2 years, while he really does have the ability to get things done before the midterms, and determine what of these flawed immigration laws can actually be changed and can actually be put on the books to last.
Irina Sukerman, I'd like to look at Trump's other comments, of course, relating to Mexico, but also Canada. His foreign policy, he's been clear in saying during his inauguration ceremony that the Gulf of Mexico is going to be renamed. He's continuously mocked Canada and referred to it as the 51st state. These actions that he's taking on immigration, how much do you think that might strain the relationship with those border nations? And what do you think the impact could be if he needs their support, or as he continues throughout his 4 years with those border nations?
Quite frankly, his comments regarding Canada are mystifying. First of all, he himself acknowledged that he has no real intention of annexing Canada, that he is thinking more about economic pressure. What's even more mystifying is that the next head of government in Canada is likely to be a conservative who shares a lot of Trump's outlooks and who has promised to reinstate conservative policies regarding border security and economy that would be beneficial to both countries. What I don't understand is, with a likely friendly face in Canada, why Trump would not start with private discussions regarding his plans, regarding deliverables, regarding mutually beneficial policies, and instead continue attacking Canada as if it's an adversarial state. It sends the wrong message, and his opening towards China, for instance, has been by far softer than expected, given the fact that the general sentiment within the Republican Party for all these years has been that China is our #1 geopolitical and national security threat. So why Trump would continue antagonizing Canada and risking a backward is unclear, but I do believe that if conservatives do end up in leadership positions there, they will still proceed with friendly policies, at least on the border security issue. Out of their own interest, Canada has been suffering from some of the similar national security and economic concerns as the United States. Tariffs are, of course, a different matter. Regarding Mexico, it's already a difficult situation. The government there has not been always friendly to the United States. Trump's comments are whipping up populism inside the country. This would be a good opportunity for Trump to engage the people of Mexico, to who are also dealing with the fact of mass migration through their country, and to work jointly and to send a more diplomatic and nuanced message to them, while perhaps putting specific levels of pressure on the government. But I don't see that level of nuance in Trump's rhetoric, and I don't think he's getting very good advice on this issue.
Dick Qatari, Trump during his inauguration speech didn't pull his punches. The language he was using, criminal aliens, disastrous invasion of our country. Is Trump risking losing support from first, second and maybe third generation immigrants who might have supported him, but now after hearing his tone, hearing his rhetoric, might be thinking again about what Trump thinks about them and also other people that have migrated to the United States to work?
No, I don't think so, because he's got his own sort of cabal in the shape of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, for example. Both of them are, they've come through the systems of being non-Americans first, and then they've embraced the sort of American identity and have flourishing businesses and have successfully sort of lived that American dream. So I don't see people becoming disgruntled with whatever he says, because I think that was somewhere expected for him to kick that political correctness into the dustbin, and that is why he was voted into power. So I per se don't see people being antagonized to that extent. Joshua.
Dick Qatari, thank you so much for your time. Also, thank you to Dr. Emma Long. Thank you, Elizabeth Laras. Thank you, Irina Sukerman, and also thank you, Daniel Wagner. Trump's reign has only just started, but we know over the next few days, months and years, there'll be much more to come. Stay tuned for that on NewsX.